First of all, let me select everything and remove the slicer. We need to have this pivot table 100% selected for all the period. Whatever our model period is, which is June 17 to May 22, 31st May 22, the columns for this particular period should be available all the time. You shouldn't pivot this or slice it or filter it. Otherwise, this particular technique may not work. Let's move the pivot table. So to move that, or you can also move this to another sheet, but I'll be keeping this pivot table in this existing sheet. I will just move it down. So we'll go to options, move table, and let's go a little bit down and go to row 90 and click OK. We can again hide it. Now I like the formatting of this particular pivot table, so I'll select everything, Control C, I'll come up here, paste like this, and since it has pasted values, we are not bothered with anything else. Now we did this just to get the format of this table. We can remove it because we'll be using a formula to pull all this. Now here we have to apply same technique as we did with our simple model. So we have to go to our control panel and take link like this from here. And we'll be using end of the month function for subsequent month. So we have our period which is in sync with our individual prepayment schedules as well. Now to pull prepayment GL name dynamically, we can link the same to our pivot table which we moved earlier, right? So we can click here like this. Let me just give some space. Suppose we're going to be having at least 30 prepayment expenses. So we'll keep some buffer space. So I have linked to below pivot table. I can copy and paste. Now since we only have a 7 prepayment GL, currently it is appearing like this correctly, but after that it is linking the grand total and blank rows as well. And it is fine, we can link up to 30 row in the pivot table itself, assuming we'll be expanding to 30 prepayment GL. But whenever there is nothing, it will appear like grand total and 00. We don't want to see that. Now we have to write if function to overcome this particular issue of grand total and zeros. So let's do that. We'll go to cell A6 where A113, which is from pivot table's first row, is already linked. So we can modify the same. So we're gonna write if or the first test is if A113, which is a cell range from our pivot table, is grand total, or A113 is equal to null or nothing, close the logical test. What we want if either of this condition is true, so we are using OR function with if. So if either of them is true, we want blank cell, blank value. Otherwise we want 113. Press enter and copy it down. You can see in row 13 there was grand total, it is gone now. We can copy this formula down till row 33. Now let me pull this value prepaid business license from our pivot table. So we go to a pivot table and link it. Now you see it's not a simple link like is equal to cell range. It has given a get pivot function, which is by default. If you pull anything from pivot table values, it generates this function. You can of course disable it from pivot table options, but we're going to use this to our advantage, and I'll show you how. Here, what are the arguments of this get pivot function? So data field is amount, of course, pivot table, field name is prepaid GL, and item is prepaid business license, right? So we can make it dynamic. Currently it's hard coded as a text, as you can see here, but we want to give a cell range instead of that. So we can delete it and give this particular cell range and make the column absolute. And now months, it's a field, but date, we can make it dynamic. How? We can delete the item and link this date and make the row absolute. Press enter and we got the same value. Now you can drag the formula down like this, and also you can drag it horizontally like this. Press enter. We are done. Now anytime in future, if you have new prepayment GL, it will be pulled from this pivot table. So here also you have to data and refresh it, and it will be automatically pulled. Now we should copy this formula down till our maximum rows which we have assumed, but it will have an error like this, reference error. Why? Because there is no data currently available. This is for our future proofing whenever we have additional prepayment expense GLs and sheets. We can ignore this error by using if error function. So let's wrap this get pivot function with if error. So if error, we want nothing. Press enter. We can copy this entire range and it's done. Now you won't see any reference errors, and we can hide it. We can give grand total, and now we have to make sure that we are pulling till row 33. Now let's add one more prepayment expense sheet or prepayment expense besides this visa expense. So move or copy, create a copy. Now we can name this prepaid vehicle insurance. Enter. Let's give same name in B70 and A2. Save it couple of times just in case. Now go to our prepayment summary, go to data, refresh. Now you didn't see anything changing here. Why? Because this is not a pivot table, this is our hybrid table. And if you remember, we had a maximum limit and we have hidden the blank rows before, right? So we have to unhide it. So select this, unhide, and you see a new prepaid vehicle insurance prepayment sheet and GL has been added with the same balance because we of course copied it from the previous GL. And now we can hide balance rows. It has been pulled from our pivot table, which is here, as you can see. Now suppose if I change this to April again, save it, come back here, as you can see it is already given April because this is a formula link. But let's pull figures as well. You can see it has come now. So this is how you prepare a hybrid table like this, where you can use pivot table functionality and also use formulas. As I mentioned before, pivot table cannot work with custom fiscal years like starting from April, June. So in that case we can still use pivot table, but you can do into hybrid table like this where you will be using formula and also pulling information from the pivot table. As I showed you, Power Query is a very powerful tool, and if you are using pivot table all the time, I highly recommend you go through Power Query courses, or you can also read Power Query books which I have linked in my previous section. If you have any question, please let me know in the Q&A section below and I'll be happy to answer that. So I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.